This episode is brought to you by the Denver Art Museum, because you can experience all stars, American artists from the Phillips Collection, right now at the museum. Discover some of the best American art from one of the most celebrated collections in the United States. See landmark works by more than 50 artists, including Jackson Pollock, Edward Hopper, Georgia O'Keeffe, Jacob Lawrence, and more. This special exhibition is only on view for a limited time. See it now. Learn more and buy tickets at denverartmuseum.org. That's denverartmuseum.org. Today on CityCast Denver, what if there was a museum dedicated solely to Denver? Other cities have one, so why not us? Some people with real clout are starting to take this idea pretty seriously. So today, we are too. Westward editor Patty Calhoun has been following the Museum of Denver story, and she's going to help us imagine a perfect location, ideas for exhibits, and the greatest food court of all time. Today is Monday, November 20th. I'm Bree Davies, and here's what Denver's talking about. Patty Calhoun, welcome back to CityCast Denver.
Thanks so much.
Producer Paul Caroli is also here. Hello.
Hey, good morning, Bree.
So, Patty, tell us about this idea for a Museum of Denver. Like, where did it come from? Whose idea was this?
Well, I think we can point the finger at Jason Hansen, who's at History Colorado. He's kind of the curator. He's the creative mind behind so many things. And I'd heard about this from him maybe a year ago because we're Forever Talk. Well, they're one block from our office, as you know.
Sure.
And we've talked a lot over the years about the Sand Creek exhibit and many other things. And he had mentioned this offhand, but over the last year, it's really picked up speed. He realized that every time he goes to another city, the first thing he does as a historian is look for that town's museum. It can be a tiny little town or it can be a big city. He likes St. Louis's, for example. But if you think about Denver, there is no museum devoted just to Denver. And we have that beautiful civic center with all those interesting buildings. And wouldn't it be a great place, near History Colorado, near the library, near the art museum, to have a Museum of Denver too?
Well, I mean, it's a nice idea, but it strikes me that he's like an actual museum professional too. I mean, is this a viable thing? Is this real at all?
Well, let's face it. If you want to do some big cultural institution, you are going to need people who want to give you money.
Yes.
I mean, there's no question. Now, a lot of the little museums in towns, maybe they take up a shelf in the library. Maybe they moved into the old depot. So there are always possibilities of starting small and at least getting the collection going. That makes sense. I mean, you could still put it somewhere. I mean, there's the McNichols building, which would be a great use of the McNichols building.
Right, in Civic Center
I would
Park,
love
sure.
that.
Exactly, which has always had kind of an identity crisis since it's been renovated. Great event space, some good
Beautiful
exhibits,
space.
but
It's not used. I don't feel like
Okay, event space.
it's a,
Okay.
Oh, we've had events there.
the audio
few events,
audio
they're
is
okay.
difficult in there, but also just like it just is not in people's minds as a place until you say I'm going to McNichols for this.
Yeah.
Versus it being the Museum
Right,
of Denver.
exactly. That you would just hop in on your lunch hour.
Yeah.
If not that, and of course the city owns that building, it would be kind of a good segue. How about that horrible corner of 15th and Broadway, which at one point there was a proposal to put the Medal of Honor Museum there.
That's right. So
and
this
we were
is-
vying with another city. So there are drawings for a potential museum there. But you would need someone who wanted to maybe gift the city of Denver with a museum, because I don't see the city of Denver paying for a museum right now.
That's like a gravel area.
Oh, it's just a mess
to
next
the
to
park
RTD.
or next to the RTD.
Next to the not Market Street, the Civic Center station. But RTD doesn't own that gravel part.
Who owns it?
So I'm actually not sure, but I should probably
Could be a
find
good
out
spot.
before I say this again on another show. But
You're selling me on the McNichols building, though.
well, the McNichols building is
I
an
like
obvious
that.
one, and many people have had
Carnegie
their eye on
Library,
it.
great
and when
history.
they first started redoing it, they were thinking about a big restaurant there, make it more like Central Park, which would also be cool. But you could do both.
You could do both. I've got some ideas for a restaurant that would go into this museum, which is maybe where we should go. We are getting together right now so we can discuss our thoughts on if there were a Museum of Denver, what would we put in it? Paul, do you want to start?
I'd love to.
Of course you
This was
would.
the
You'd
most
do it.
fun prompt. There's so many possibilities. I feel like I just got like a tiny, tiny little piece of
Same.
what this could be. I'll just rattle off a bunch of ideas here. I mean, here's one that I think we should represent in some way. When people of Denver banded together to reject the Olympics, Denver won the bid to host the 1976 Olympics, but in the early 70s, our former governor, Dick Lamb, who has passed in the last couple of years, led this movement to reject the games. I feel like we should have perhaps an empty sconce for the torch that never came, that never was.
Of course, that was a statewide ballot measure that took it away from Denver. It was the whole who profits, who pays. But still, there are little remnants of Denver. Like there's some housing up by 20th near Benedict Park that was going to be where they put the press. So you have remnants around town of that incredibly insane plan. I mean, some of the insanity was putting ski jumps in places that don't get snow. So there are other issues with it, but you're right. It's a chapter of Denver and how activist Denver was, and really the politics of the 70s in Denver. When
Totally
you elected Pat
foundational.
Schroeder.
I would like to see, in relation to that, some of the campaign flyers and the news coverage. That would be the ephemera I would want in the museum, to see how it was being positioned and the language that was being used, because that's always interesting to me.
I saw a video that I don't remember who produced
Chamber of
it.
Commerce.
The Chamber of Commerce
It's
produced
really
it.
good.
Really good
watch it.
video to promote the idea of a Denver Olympics, and it's got all this swooping shots of the Rockies and stuff. It's beautiful, but I imagine that on a loop in the Museum of Denver.
The Denver Olympic story starts in a land of Olympian proportions, the American West. Massive, majestic, you can feel it all around you. The heroes, the villains, the hardship, and the triumph. Here, man has fashioned unique relationships to himself and to the land. A spirit lives here, the tradition of the West.
Oh, love it. Okay.
All right, so that's one. Here's another idea. This is more for like an exhibit, and a lot of these are like, I feel like essentials. Like we need to have some of this stuff in here, but I'm calling this the Hall of Mayoral Bullshit. So each mayor, I'm imagining we would represent with a single object. So Wellington Webb's sneakers that he wore while
Already
he was campaigning.
in History, Colorado, of course.
So perhaps Jason Hansen might be able to organize some kind of a loan there. A tap handle from John Hickenlooper's Wynkoop
Already in there.
Brewing. Another one. For Federico Pena, I thought maybe a chunk of the 16th Street Mall that they are tearing up right now. We could go grab one.
Or is there like a miniature scale model of DIA?
I mean, we need to have DIA in this museum.
We have to
somewhere.
a lot on DIA in this museum. And the whole Poundstone Amendment, people don't know it. Just outside this room, I was educating some of our younger writers the other day that the Poundstone Amendment was created because people didn't want evil white flight and busing coming from Denver into their lily white suburbs. So what they did is they made sure Denver couldn't annex any other areas. And that's why we had to have the vote over DIA, because that wasn't Denver land.
So it's so much deeper than we wanted a big international airport.
Let me add one mayoral bullshit
Please
thing,
do.
which is 100 years ago, when Ben Stapleton was elected mayor with the help of the KKK, the whole buy-in by the city Brahmas into the KKK, and not just the city, but the state, but the city was run by the KKK, basically. We need a big exhibit devoted to that.
Yeah.
I think so too. I mean,
Yeah, we've got to really show that part of our history, because it's very telling of who we are and how far we've come also.
all right, so switch gears from the Hall of Mayoral Bullshit. Here's my next big idea. This is for to represent the fact that Denver has become the cradle of the fast casual revolution.
Oh,
so
gee. Oh,
many
I feel where
important,
this is
huge
going.
restaurant chains were founded here. So in 1993, a culinary school graduate, a Denverite, he had just done a stint working under Jeremiah Tower in San Francisco. His name was Steve Ells. He came back to Denver and he started a burrito restaurant down on Evans. Chipotle, obviously, is what I'm talking about. But here's what I want to represent Chipotle with. I read, and maybe this was in Westward, I actually don't remember, but a few years ago, they were renovating the first Chipotle location
on
Evans.
on Evans, and they added the order down the line thing because that wasn't actually initially
it was such
part
a tiny
of the
place.
It was so tiny. It's kind of interesting to think about how that first happened. But anyway, I remember reading, and I saw a picture of a one of the rafters in the basement of that location where Steve Ells and some of the original some of his original employees all signed their names. I think that beam should be in the Museum of Denver.
Well, if it didn't knock down the building it currently is in, since that one's still operating. But
if it's an essential beam, it can stay down on Evans. But if it's inessential, get it up in McNichols. That's what I say.
I have so many feelings about this, Paul, because we know Chipotle is not representative of Colorado or Denver Mexican food to me by what I know.
I'm raising my eyes.
By what I know historically
Furiously.
and conversations with Patty and Gustavo Arellano about this. So if we have that, I think we need the rise of the fast casual empire, including the first Quiznos, the story, the Tokyo Joe's,
The Noodles and Co.
Smash Burger.
the smash burgers, the spicy pickles, rest in peace, of the things that came and went because of that. But then also we'll have a separate section on Denver Mexican food, of course.
As
I
it
think.
evolved. I mean, when you think about it, so Mexico City Lounge is celebrating its 65th right now. We have La Fiesta, which just celebrated its 60th. You can go back pretty far with families still running these places. But certainly we can try to figure out when it became popular. Oh, I can tell you this. Buffalo Bill opened the first Mexican restaurant in the country in New York City.
Buffalo
in the
Bill?
1880s. Buffalo Bill did.
What?
He had his Wild West
bet it was
show
horrible.
in New York City. I'll bet it was horrible too. And they were serving like chili rellenos. He opened a restaurant there.
In New York City?
Yeah. So if you talk to
someone said that's the first Mexican restaurant in the
I'm
country.
telling you, if you talk to Gustavo Arellano, and
don't know.
I introduced him to Steve Friesen, who used to be the head of the Buffalo Bill Museum here, Buffalo Bill Museum and Grave. And it's true. Now, you've got to think there were probably
Oh, I'm
little
sure there were
holes in the wall, but when you also
family-owned.
think there weren't a lot of restaurants. People didn't take their kids to go eat in the San Luis Valley at a restaurant.
No, and also kid
took 'em to
kid
Grandma's.
menus didn't
Yeah.
exist till like 40 or 50 years
Right. So
ago
if
or
you think
something
about
anyway. But
when
yeah.
restaurants really evolved as a family dining place, that was much later. It was much more the fancy type things or people who were going to Madison Square Gardens to see Buffalo Bill.
Oh my gosh, I bet that food was terrible. That's all I got to say about that.
Oh, almost certainly.
I think we even have the
Buffalo
menu
Bill's Mexican.
somewhere. I will send that to you.
That'll be fun. We'll put it in the Museum of Denver.
Well, we're going to have to steal things from other museums, and you can see actually that, say, History Colorado has done some exhibits that might
definitely.
belong more in the in Museum of Denver, but no one's doing those, and you have to. You've got to
Yeah,
do the
they're
KKK.
they know what they're
You've
doing.
got to do the mayors of Denver because it's still the capital.
Totally.
All right, let me hit you with my last idea. The last one I like. And
Okay.
now, you mentioned earlier, Patty, that they're going to need a lot of money to make this happen. So this is both an idea for an exhibit and a corporate sponsor. I am proposing the World of Pepsi. So Pepsi,
Lord.
as some people know, are currently working on their largest bottling plant in the country. They chose to build it right here in Denver, out by the airport. And I think, like Atlanta has the World of Coke, where you can taste Coca-Cola from all around the world and all the Coke products from history. We should be able to do that here. And where better than the Museum of Denver to embrace Denver's identity as Pepsi Town?
Well, of course, we no longer have the Pepsi Center,
Unfortunately,
so
yes.
I'm not so sure.
Unfortunately, yes.
But Center of Ball is not going to be so
It's
good.
not very cool sounding. It's a really tough one.
I don't know. How about microbrews instead?
That's kind of what I was thinking, or even just
Why not both?
Yeah, I mean, I would be
Rocky Mountain Dew, little Rocky Mountain Dew mural on the wall.
Oh my god. Oh gosh. No,
All right.
no Meryl.
All right, well,
no Meryls.
wait. If they give a lot of money, I guess we could figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
I didn't think about the money part. Okay.
We're
Well,
going to need that money.
Oh, the money. Just to, even if you get McNichols, which would be, and there is a group of people working. Kendra Black is one of the former city council person. She signed on when she knew she wasn't going to run again. They're trying to get all the former mayors on an advisory committee. They actually want to open it up to the city for suggestions on what should be in the Museum of Denver. They want it to be inclusive, which will be great. if it happens. But
It's
it would be
great-
such a
it's
good
perfect
thing in that
location.
location.
Because they just did that redo. Pat Milbury just did the redo of the
On the
mural
Bannock Street.
on Bannock Street itself. You could walk across. It'd be so nice.
It really isn't. It really could be something. Well, we're looking for ideas. I think you two have got plenty, but let's go to a quick break. And listeners, we want to hear from you as well. Before we go to this break, call in. Tell us what should be in the Museum of Denver, 720-500-5418.
This episode is brought to you by Denver Botanic Gardens. Because Blossoms of Light is happening now. The annual holiday light show at the gardens runs through January 7th. Don't miss the ever-changing display of light and color with a massive animated tunnel of lights, illuminated water features, and lightscapes synchronized to music, plus holiday treats and warm drinks for purchase. This show is illuminated 100% with LED lights because Blossoms of Light aligns with the garden's core value of sustainability. CNN ranked Blossoms of Light as one of the top places to see lights in the country. Tickets are on sale now, so get yours today at botanicgardens.org. How did they score botanicgardens.org? Were they like the first botanic gardens to have a website? That's botanicgardens.org.
Maruchan superfans are everywhere. From the busy moms who want to deliver maximum flavor in a flash to dorm room diners who want to put some slurp in their step. There are a ton of copycats you could use, but if you want to bless your bowl, there's only one true Maruchan. Whether you choose instant lunch, ramen bowls, yakisoba, or restaurant quality gold, Maruchan is the only ramen worth obsessing over. Smiles for all. Maruchan. See what all the ramen hype is about at maruchan.com.
And we're back. Patty, let's start with you. What do you got?
Well, I did bring in the original copies of Westward, which I would say newspapers in general would be very fascinating because think about how many newspapers were originally in Denver and that Byers started the Rocky Mountain News.
The Byers family.
William Byers.
William Byers.
Just days after gold was found here, he came out so fast. Another guy would have been the one who started it, but he went to the gold mines first just to actually do some reporting. So by the time he came back, the Rocky Mountain News was established.
Scooped.
But just the history of Denver papers, what they used to be like. May it rest in peace, the Rocky Mountain News. And maybe we could get the archives from the Rocky Mountain News in there.
That would be
So-
a really great feature for a Museum of Denver. I
Hello,
love
Phil
that.
Anschutz, we're talking to you, but some of the things you own would be great.
I love that. I
It's a
love
good idea.
the Westward Archives too. You brought them out and I was like, oh man, I want to read through every single piece of this because it's not just, the articles, but it's like who was advertising at that time.
Mobile
The
hot tubs. I mean, imagine we could have a mobile hot tub outside this thing.
There's an illustrated ad for Govs Park, which just makes me want to go to Govs Park, which doesn't exist anymore. It's beautiful.
What was on the cover of the first Westward, Patty? 1977.
It actually was a not very smart marketing thing because you're supposed to, you're supposed to make people pick up the paper, even if it's free. You have to create demand. It was a picture of a coal miner.
I have to say, when you showed me that, I was like, this was the first one?
Yeah, it was
Surprised me by
not
you.
really a smart idea.
Well, it worked okay in the end.
Also black and white,
Yeah, you got to work with what you have. Okay, so the archives, sure.
But
what
not
else?
just us. I mean, everyone
Everything.
is out there. And you also had the early Latino newspapers. You had the early black newspapers, the Japanese, the Chinese. I mean, really interesting. So, of course, I'm going to be partial to that. But you were also looking TV. I mean, we should. Okay, I have a new idea. If we can't do it at McNichols, we're taking over Cable Land. Have you ever been in Cable Land?
You let me go
What's
in
Cable
Cable
Land?
Land. Okay, so Cable Land is the Bill Daniels mansion, which is on Shangri-La Drive, which is not far from your house, Paul. It's Sculpture Park. It's like the Target and the Colorado Boulevard.
Yeah.
It's like Colorado Boulevard.
Leetsdale-ish, yeah.
Leetsdale-ish. And it's this little strip, and it's this like half moon street that nobody drives on because it's fancy houses. And Cable Land is one of the mansions on this house. And it was Bill Daniels, the cable magnate that brought cable television to Colorado. But it is like... They did a little remodeling, which I wish they didn't do, Patty, honestly, because it is like
the mauveness
Scarface
of it was so unbelievable.
Coke den looking, has a fire pole in it. It has
In the bedroom.
In the
master
bedroom.
bedroom is a fire pole. It also has these walls
amazing.
of TVs, and it was given by Bill Daniels to the city
city.
of Denver. He wanted it to be the mayoral residence, but After that, no mayor really wanted to live there, although we do understand different
It's a
city
real bachelor
officials
pad.
without a place to live have gone in the guest quarters. Like I believe Michael Hancock was there for a while after he separated from his wife. But it is
Former Mayor
still,
Hancock.
you know,
Yes,
it is now used mostly for city events, and occasionally it's leased out, but for a nonprofit. But that could be our backup, because I'm thinking the walls of TVs, and we could show
Honestly.
Blinky the Clown. We could show, what was it,
such a
Sheriff
sick
Scotty, all the old TV shows that were in this town.
Yeah, I dreamed of it as like an ultimate DIY space, like Rhinoceropolis 3.0 in that place. Would have been amazing. Telephones next to the toilet. I mean, there was a tanning bed in there. It was 80s fancy.
It was like Dynasty, which of course we should also be
Oh, yeah,
showing
of course.
nonstop in
Which
there.
was quote unquote set.
in Denver.
In Denver.
And all they basically ever did here, they did go to the Carousel Ball once when Marvin Davis, who was the oil magnate here, who wound up buying 20th Century Fox at some point. But so the whole cast of Dynasty came out here for one of his benefits, the Carousel Ball.
Oh, see, that's the only time.
And then
Dynasty
otherwise
was
they
actually
showed
here.
like something of 17th Street in the credits.
Yeah.
I keep meaning to watch some of that
It's
show.
not. It's
Is
not
it
going to
not
like
worth
give.
watching?
It's not giving
Oh, no.
you Denver
Oh, no.
vibes at all.
Well, it's not giving you really any vibes
No,
at
it's-
all. It's quite horrible.
Yeah.
But entertaining.
All right, what else you got, Patty?
Well, I think I talked about the restaurants, which I think are important. I think music, we have to talk about just what kind of music was played where and when, and certainly the rise of the 60s. We have to talk about marijuana, magic mushrooms. The first federal marijuana bust was in Colorado. In fact, it might even have been in Denver. So that was in the 30s. We need to talk about that how it's growing and how different things are happening. There were some LSD labs in Denver in the 60s that were notorious around the country.
We're going to have a whole drug timeline.
How would we represent the marijuana thing, though? That's a huge topic. And like legalization, I don't know.
I mean, I see it as like a timeline in a museum. You know
Right.
what I mean?
And you would talk about when
Starting-
it became federally illegal
Yeah.
and what they did to vilify it and make it like a bad Mexican drug when, in fact, hemp was being grown here for so long.
Totally.
So, and that was the 30s. The first people busted federally here.
All the way down to where it is as a recreational drug, intrinsic to our music community for sure. I mean,
Well,
Red
and
Rocks.
the seniors now, who were smoking it in the 60s and now use it for their arthritis.
It's great.
It's fascinating.
all right. Anything else,
Yeah,
Patty? you got on
you
your
got
list?
more? These are
Well,
fun.
clearly you also have to go back to the early story of when Denver came to be. What was here before? The tribes that were peaceful meeting, with the confluence, and said
yes.
said to the gold hunters, "Don't camp here because it floods the confluence of Cherry Creek and the South Platte." So, because we are still having trouble getting a memorial to the Cheyenne and the Arapaho and their descendants of the people killed at Sand Creek, maybe we could do it at the Museum of Denver because we're not getting one at the Capitol yet.
I like
So
that
we
idea.
have to deal with
does
that
feel
for
right.
sure.
That feels like a nice way to open the museum.
Absolutely.
Like you
Right.
walk in, you
Would
see
be
a
great.
big, beautiful memorial. Like this is what was here before Denver.
But then you hear the story, which I like you just talked about, which is don't camp here. It floods. And then what happened?
Right, and you have
flooded.
You would have to work in partnership, obviously, with History Colorado. So convenient
sure.
that Jason is there because they've got that excellent Sand Creek exhibit
a nice
now.
tie-in.
So you would send them over, and that was 160 miles from Denver where it happened. But they paraded body parts and little captive Indian children through the streets of Denver afterwards and put the kids on a stage.
This is actually giving me a new idea. The flooding thing reminds me of that old diorama in History Colorado about the water, all the network of reservoirs that Denver Water has built over the last 150 years to supply the city with water. They should update that diorama because it's in pretty bad shape right now, and that would be great in the Museum of Denver
Well,
as
we
well.
would offer to take some off their hands in the Museum of Denver.
Yeah, I would spruce that
I
up.
think some of the shysters and hoaxsters, from the Soapy Smith days to also.
I didn't know the Soapy Smith story. I just went to the bar called Soapy Smith's.
What's the Soapy Smith story for people who don't know?
I think
it's a
he
great
would
story.
wouldn't it? He would hand out bars of soap and he would say there were great things inside, but there weren't. I think that was him. But we've had so many shysters come in, like in right by Union Station, where they would just pick off people like suckers. Alan Prendergast, in his book on Philip von Zeiss, the battling DA in the 1920s, who fought the KKK, he also fought all these shysters who were coming in and just getting these rubes right off the train. Denver was known as the big store because people were so easy to con. And the con men just thought, ripe for the picking. You just pick them off the shelves like at a store. That I had never heard about. I'd
So
never heard that
depressing.
till Alan released that book this year.
Wow.
So we should have a con men corner. And, it goes all the way up to today. But we had a fake sheik who came and fooled an former FBI guy who'd opened a hotel on Wazee Street just 20 years ago.
Brie, I feel like we got to go to you.
I
wanna
know.
hear some
Well,
of your
she just
ideas,
said the
too.
big store, and this is not in my list, but now I'm thinking about the ski slope that came out of the BDNF building on 16th Street. Just
And there was
a
one
retail
at the Sports
moment.
Castle.
Really? Mm-hmm. Retail was a much different experience back then, but oh gosh, and the hyperbolic paraboloid and I.M. Pei's work. But okay, none of this is on my list. Let me start. I would say, okay, so I had a couple ideas that I just were throwaways, but we were talking about restaurants, Mexican restaurants. I think that we could recreate the lobby at the old Chubby's, which was like tiny and cramped, and like you came after the club let out and then you went into the club known as Chubby's. And it just had a very distinct feeling that I think would be fun to reenact. And smell and the chaos that ensues there. I also thought the bathroom at Bar would be a good installation for a museum. It was probably still the most disgusting restroom I've ever used in the city of Denver. True experience.
I'll join you on that.
These are all my throwaways, though.
I haven't had the pleasure.
Paul, I don't know if I don't know for your safety if I'd want you to go in there at this point. And then the fun house at Lakeside was something that I would also want to recreate because it closed down when I was 6. I don't have memories of it. Old Denver still talks about it. It was one of those old fun houses where people probably got hurt inside a lot.
What's happening in there? What's so fun about this?
Like they would have these rotating floorboards where you would get thrown off of it, like you laid down and you would get thrown off of it, and there was a thing that blew air up of women's skirts and like very that era thing. But
that sounds fun though. That's
and
cool.
then the Laughing Sal, which was this giant like sort of puppet of a woman that was out front that made this terrifying laugh. I've seen a Laughing Sal actually on Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco, and it is a Victorian era terror that children did not. I don't know why it was aimed at children, but people say Laughing Sal in Lakeside still exists somewhere in the storage. But those were my throwaways. So I guess
Those are good.
I had so many ideas, but I would start with the entrance to the museum would have the 2 fiberglass hula girls from the Rainbow Ride at Elitch's. This was my favorite ride at Elitch's.
From Old Elitch's.
Well, it's one of the few rides that went from Old Elitch's to New Elitch's.
Where is it in New
It's
Elitch's?
gone now. It's gone.
Oh.
But it did make the trip. And it was just a very simple ride. It looked like sort of like a stand of bleachers that you sat in, and then it went in a circle in the air. But there were these 2 fiberglass women that were just like greeting you on it. So that would be my old Elitch's
Love that one. That's a good call.
touch. I don't know. Did you have an Old Elitch's favorite, Patty?
Not really. I mean, I would love to transport the whole theater
Oh, yeah,
to
the
the
theater
Museum of
itself.
Denver or the carousel.
That could be a good location. Well, who knows what they're doing with it over
Well,
there.
they're trying. They're trying to save it. I mean, we can look at alternatives where you could be like Cable Land.
Yes.
Or they could be satellites too, or the old Elitch's Theater.
That theater is so cool because it truly is stuck in time. When you go in there, you're like, holy cow.
But the big danger is if you're going to try to make a museum work, it has to be something that people can just drop into easily.
That's true. That's
So-
true. Get a tough sell.
What else you got, Brie?
Well, I wanted to commemorate ADAPT and the work that they did around the disability rights movement here in the late 70s and early 80s. In 1978, RTD had just rolled out this brand new fleet of over 250 buses to serve the city of Denver, and none of them were wheelchair accessible. Atlantis, which was the first independent living community for people with disabilities in the country, was right here in Sun Valley, and they sued and said, these are not accessible to us, and the courts didn't agree with them. So in response, disability rights activists, disabled people, got out into the streets and put themselves in front of buses at Colfax and Broadway. They put their bodies in front of the buses to stop them from moving, to make the point that they could not get on those buses. And it was this revolutionary act that changed the way transportation works across the country and really kickstarted this conversation about disability and the rights of folks with disabilities to have I mean, this was the 70s. We didn't get the ADA until 1990. So this was the work that they did here in Denver.
Right. So it would be right at the corner where the
Yeah,
museum
it'd
would
be
be,
perfect.
depending. And they're actually already talking about putting some memorial up in Civic Center to that group. But why not?
Because there's
have a
one
whole
little
exhibit?
plaque, but it's not enough. And I know that History Colorado did a phenomenal one, and ADAPT, the actual organization, has its own museum as well over in Baker. But I would love to have a piece of that in the Denver Museum. So maybe some signage, some folks some wheelchairs from the activists that were part of it.
Yeah, that would be a really interesting exhibit.
It'd be so cool because when you see those photographs, Paul, I think it just like makes you realize these folks literally put their bodies in the street to get access to transportation.
And there's
It's pretty
a
incredible.
little memorial to it
It's
at Meow
tiny.
Wolf of all
Oh,
places.
yeah.
Yeah.
In the there's a bus in it, in the Meow Wolf exhibit. That's part of the whole storyline. And there's a little bit about ADAPT in Meow Wolf as well. That's a
What
good
was
point.
that like, Patty, in 1978? You were the Westward. You must have been covering that.
Yeah, well, we were. It was, it was wild. I guess we didn't realize just how revolutionary it was for the whole country. We just thought, this is good. It's happening in Denver. We talked to those people a lot. We were downtown. So, but it really woke people up.
Yeah, it's one of the most mobilizing stories I've ever heard when I was learning about activism. And I was like, this is so cool that it happened here in Denver. So,
It's a great one. Yeah, what else you got?
my final piece, it would be every museum has a great restaurant. And mine would be an immersive Breakfast King. You would get to go to the old Breakfast King. So it would be an actual restaurant, just as any museum has, but it would be an exact replication of Breakfast King, orange booths, wood paneled walls. But there's also actors in it, like there are at Meow Wolf. So there's like a rowdy crowd of drunk people behind you. There's maybe some construction
for that job.
workers. So it's
And
an
the Breakfast
immersive.
King is there still. We
It
could
still
probably just
is. I think you
transport
could
it.
take the whole thing and put it in there, but I just selfishly want to go to the Breakfast King again, and this was my way of
This
putting
feels
it
like the
into the
way.
museum.
Yeah.
But also, I know people that would pay to have an immersive experience of going back to the Breakfast King.
Yeah. Would that be the restaurant you'd want to recreate, Patty? Or
I
is
would
there
have
a
to say
different
the
one?
restaurant we need back in Denver is Racine's, because we do not have the go-to restaurant.
It's true, Patty.
I mean, I was thinking about it. I think I ran into you there. Halloween, I would go to Racine's. You'd run into so many people you knew. It was the go-to spot when you couldn't think of where to go.
When I was in journalism school, they said, get a job at Racine's. You'll meet all of the press people and all the politicians.
So, and it's been a tougher town without it.
Yes.
So I would say for practicality, that would be great. But maybe we could also have Breakfast King. Why not two? Some people have casual, smaller restaurants.
I just
and
want
then
biscuits
larger.
and gravy.
Why not? I'll just call my friends at Pepsi. We'll get, another check. We
You
can
are
do two
very
restaurants.
optimistic about Pepsi, I have to say.
I
Well,
love
listeners, those are our ideas.
We've got so many. We've got the Olympics.
Chipotle.
We've got Chipotle. We've got all of the
Mayors and their junk.
the big store, the Chuckster, the
The big
Chucksters,
store would be so great.
the big store.
Well, listeners, those are our ideas. We want to hear from you. Like I said, send us your best ones. Send us the stuff that we couldn't think of. The Museum of Denver hotline is open. Call in, leave us a voicemail, send us a text, 720-500-5418. Again, the Museum of Denver hotline is open at 720-500-5418.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Patty.
Thank you.
Yeah, this was super fun. I can't wait till this is real.
That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed the show, why not take a minute to tell the Scientific and Cultural Facilities District about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to our morning newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See ya! Can we get some SCFD funding? Can we become a tier 3?